I make a lot of videos about mysteries over on my main channel. And I also just really love mysteries in general. I like reading mysteries. I like writing about mysteries. So I'm very familiar with the classic tropes and just story structures used in a lot of classic mysteries. And something I've been thinking about lately is a trope that everyone has heard about, which is the butler did it. It's such a famous cliche, and it's like supposedly a very overdone reveal. But when I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't know if I've ever actually watched or read a mystery where the butler did it. Now, of course, there's like, I've watched like an episode of a Disney Channel show when I was a kid where they do like a little murder mystery episode, and it was like, oh, it was the butler. It's always the butler, right? So if it's like a parody or a joke based on the classic cliche of, the butler did it, yeah, I've seen that. Real quick, before we move forward, check the description down below for spoiler warnings, because I will be spoiling some mysteries in this video. So if you don't want like a murder mystery book from 1963 spoiled for you, check the description down below, and then you don't have to watch this video. All right, you still here? Okay. Like in the Adam Sandler movie Murder Mystery, the bad guy in that movie is revealed to have the last name Butler. So even though there was not an actual butler in the movie, the butler did it. So I went looking for where this trope came from. Where did this trope originate from? Where was it so prevalent that the butler was always being revealed as the killer that it is like commonplace household knowledge to just be like, oh, it was the butler did it? Well, it turns out that people think that the kind of term the butler did it originated in the 1930 novel named The Door. In that book, the villain is in fact revealed to be the butler. But here's the thing, dude, the phrase, the butler did it, is never said in that book. It's kind of like how in Star Wars, Darth Vader never says, Luke, I am your father. And yet that phrase is so integrated into our culture. Like there's some people that if you told them, hey, Darth Vader doesn't actually say it in the movie, they'll probably argue with you over it. So we know that it's not a single work of fiction or art that coined the term the butler did it. It was just a phrase that became, kind of the society's go-to through cultural osmosis. And even though this phrase is thought to have come from the 1930 novel The Door, turns out people had been complaining about the butler being the big reveal being overused for a long time before the 1930 book The Door. In fact, in the 1928 essay, 20 Rules for Writing Detective Fiction, that essay calls out the overused trope of having the butler be the big reveal. So that was 2 years before The Door came out, which means that we as a culture have been bitching about the butler being an overused trope for almost 100 years. And get this, if we go all the way back to 1893, there is a Sherlock Holmes story called The Musgrave Ritual. In that story, there is heavy suspicion placed on the butler, but the butler did not end up being the killer. The same goes for the Agatha Christie novel. Most would consider it her most famous novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. The butler is immediately the prime suspect in the murder investigation, but he did not do it. So what I'm trying to say is that if we go as far back as 1893, the butler was not doing it, because it was said all the way back in 1893 that it was a cliche for the butler to be the big reveal. In fact, in an article I found from 2003, written by Cecil Adams, he said that he was only able to find one mystery prior to the 1930 novel The Door where the butler was the big reveal. The Strange Case of Mr. Challoner by Herbert Jenkins in 1921. So other than that novel and then some silent films from like, the early 1900s, there really have not been that many mysteries where the butler is the big reveal. In fact, there have been 500 times more mysteries making fun of the trope the butler did it than there have been actual mysteries where the butler did it. But apparently, because in the 1930 novel The Door, the butler being revealed as the killer was such a big deal to the audience, people just like made up the trope. Like they got to the end of the book and they're like, "Gah, the butler always does it." Or they were like, "Oh, let me guess, the butler did it." Even though it was not that common. It was actually extremely rare. And then people just started making fun of the trope, like in the 1933 novel by Damon Runyon called what? No Butler? And a 1957 novel by P.G. Wodehouse. Now, I've seen Roadhouse. I'm pretty sure it's at least PG-13. But P.G. Wodehouse had a 1957 novel called The Butler Did It. Basically, there are two novels parodizing and satirizing a trope that did not exist. We made it up. We made up the trope. And this is not that uncommon. TVtropes.org calls this phenomenon the dead unicorn trope, a plot, character, or story element which is parodied or mocked as overused, even though it wasn't in broad use to begin with. The result is a strange meta-contextual trick where viewers congratulate themselves on the death of something that never lived. So we, as a society, made fun of the fact that the butler was always the big reveal, when in reality, the butler had pretty much never been the big reveal. So basically, long story short, where did the butler did it trope come from? Us. We made it up. It never happened. It's like if we all, as a society, watched the M. Night Shyamalan movie Old, where in that movie, the beach turns people old. And it was like, we went and saw that movie, and then everyone in the world left that movie and was like, dude, every time that there is a beach in a movie, it's turning people old. And then everyone just keeps saying that over and over. And then 10 years later, a comedy movie comes out called The Beach is Making Me Old. And the whole movie is just making fun of this crazy trope about how every time there's a beach in a movie, it makes you old. And then a book comes out a few years after that, and it's titled, Whoa, This Beach Made Me Young. And all of the critics that read this book are leaving reviews like, what a hilarious twist on a classic trope. And you wake up one day and you're 87 years old, not because you were at the beach that makes you old, you just, time progresses, and you're about to die, and you're like, man, I really want to write a novel about a beach. But in that novel, I want the beach to make you old, but I can't do that because it's so overused. Is this not insane to you guys? We gaslit ourselves as a people into thinking that something had happened hundreds of times to the point of nauseum, when in reality, it happened like once. Twice tops. Are there any other examples for stuff like this? The only thing I can really think of that's like modern would be like, how we all make fun of Marvel movies with the joke like something happens and then the camera pushes in on the main character and they go, well, that just happened. How many times has that actually been said in the movie? You know what I mean? Did it happen once and we all latched onto it? Or has it actually happened a good bit? I don't know. You guys let me know down in the comments. All right, cool.